All right, so welcome to the Columbus GreenSpot Conversations, a webinar series created by our GreenSpot Advisory Board, which delves into the different aspects of sustainability in our community. We are planning on more than 20 of these, and you can get the latest by following us on social media. GreenSpot is on Facebook, GreenSpot is on Twitter, or you could join GreenSpot at columbusgreenspot.org. And we send out these in our e-newsletters, and so our members get first crack at registering for them because we do limit the attendees. So now that we have those out of the way, I'd like to introduce today's conversation with the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. We have Rebecca Swab, who is the conservation manager, and Allison Clark, who is the education program manager at the Audubon Center. So let's get the tough questions out of the way first. Allison, what is your favorite type of bird?
Well, I actually have a couple favorites. They're seasonal, so I will go with winter and summer. My favorite winter bird is the dark-eyed junco. They're in the sparrow family. They're a little prettier than the rest of the little sparrows that you see in your yard, especially the house sparrows. They have a gray top and a white bottom, and a really beautiful tail feathers when they fly. And then I love the Baltimore Oriole in the summer because I love its song. It has a very cheerful song.
Now with them, do they do the hanging nests?
Yes, their nest looks like a little teardrop. Sometimes I tell the kids it looks like a dirty old sock thrown up in a tree. But yes.
Very cool. I think we had one over here somewhere along the trail, and it's definitely eye-catching because you're like, first you're like, is that a card? No, it's not a cardinal. And then you kind of have to go through the files in your brain of like, oh, that must be a Baltimore Oriole. Very nice. Rebecca, how about you? What are some of your favorite feathered friends?
Well, I really like the cardinal, which you were just talking about. It's such a bright, charismatic bird, and it's the state bird in Ohio and 6 other states, and it has one of the easiest to remember scientific names, Cardinalis cardinalis. So I'm going to go with the cardinal.
Very cool. I don't know if like I'm more attuned to them or not, but like the last couple mornings, I feel like we have had like the heavy metal version of a cardinal out here because their call has been so loud, waking me up at 5:30 in the morning. I mean, it's a great call, but I don't know if you've experienced that or not. But it's
I've been hearing them a lot recently. There's one in the background that I've been hearing in the last couple hours too.
Oh, very cool. They must know that you're talking about birds.
Yeah.
So, Allison, so the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. So for those who are viewing this who might not be really familiar with it, can you explain a little bit about what is the Grange Insurance Audubon Center?
Sure. So the Grange Insurance Audubon Center is kind of known as, unfortunately still known as the best kept secret in downtown Columbus, but we actually opened in 2009, fall of 2009. I came on board in April of 2010, so we've been there quite a while now. We're just south of downtown, so if you visit German Village, we're just west of German Village, and we do sit within the Scioto Audubon Metro Park, so we do have a partnership with them. The center was established through National Audubon. We have a local Columbus Audubon chapter, and a lot of birders use that area. It is an important bird area, so many birds use that area when they're traveling and migrating at different times of the year, but we also wanted to make sure that we rehab the site from an industrial site to make sure that we had habitat, food, and other sources for birds. So it has been there for quite a while now. We do education programs and conservation programs as well. We try to be a model for native plant gardens for people who are interested in those. And our biggest goal is just to make sure we help connect people with nature. So anything from preschoolers and older. We welcome to the center to learn more about nature and connecting with nature and what they can do as stewards of nature too.
I mean, it really seems like it is a success story of, I think it was the old impound lot.
Yes.
And then,
many people first knew of us because they came down to pick up cars and the impound lot had moved. So we provided education on that. A lot of other people had been down to the Whittier Peninsula to pick up furniture at the Lazarus warehouse when it was down there. But we've even met people that used to come to that area. Out on the Scioto River, there used to be a beach that people enjoyed using, which I can't imagine right now, but that is some of the history of that area as well.
Well, they say that nature is like, it helps you de-stress. So when somebody's going to pick up their car from the impound lot, they're probably stressed. And if they show up at the Audubon Center, it's a way for them to de-stress before they actually make it to where the impound lot moved. So
Exactly.
now, I imagine you all are probably incredibly busy all year round, but with spring here, do you have any programs going on that are, directed at youth or adults or everybody?
Sure. We try to hit all different age groups. We actually have some spring migration hikes coming up. I'll be doing in the mornings at 8 a.m. for the early birds that want to get the worm and see what migratory birds might be in the area. We also still have Turtle Tuesday feeding time, which is a fun time to see what they like to eat and how they eat. The snapping turtles are kind of exciting to watch. Story time is still going on. We have weekly beginner bird hikes, different programming. We have Art at Audubon is actually restarting since COVID. So we have Justin Grubb from Running Wild Media coming this week. Actually, he'll be putting up all his artwork and he's going to be doing some exciting workshops. But one of the programs that we started because of COVID and having to close the center for a while was our Native Plant Backyard Challenge. We had decided that we would start that program to help spread awareness of the importance of native plants, but then also to get people involved from home to be able to do things. So we have a lot of families. We actually have multiple family members who have signed up all together at different residents just to be able to do something together. And we opened that to 100 families and we had so much demand, we actually ended up getting about 180 households. So it's been a really popular program this year. They just received seeds. They're going to have a native plant sale so that they can get some more plants for their gardens. And we're trying to provide education and workshops and resources for people to start becoming a little more native in their own backyards.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I see a lawn, just the grass on the lawn, I always think it's kind of a biological dead zone, and a native plant should be perfect for there. And I mean, it seems like whether you get, if it's in the shade or partial sun or full sun, there's some type of native plant that can cover that, that ground with minimum maintenance involved. I know we're supposed to talk about birds, but taking a quick detour for native plants, like what are some native plants that you all would recommend? Like if you had to pick, like, I don't know, your top 2 spring or summer native plants, which ones kind of strike you as the favorites?
Well, I will let Rebecca jump in on that, but I can tell you if you have a soggy, wet backyard area, Virginia bluebells are amazing. We have some at the center under one of our mulberry trees, and that's a really exciting one. But I will let Rebecca piggyback on some other native plants that you might enjoy.
Yeah, Virginia bluebells, I think, is a great one for a spring plant for sure. One of my favorite summer plants is Monarda Fistulosa. It's a bee balm, and it has these like beautiful purple flowers that just pollinators just flock to. Anytime I planted the bee balm in my yard, and if you go there on a summer day, you can just watch the bees buzzing back and forth. It's great for the kids as well. And of course, milkweed. Common milkweed grows really well in people's yards. It does need a sunny spot. And it's, of course, the host plant for monarch butterflies, so it's really important to help protect that declining species as well.
And Rebecca, kind of on that same topic, like if somebody wants to attract birds to their yard, what are the bird basics that somebody would need to do?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that question actually by starting by asking you a question. So this is a trick question, I'll tell you in advance. And maybe you've heard this before. This is something that Jim McCormick has talked about. What is the biggest group of herbivores by biomass in Ohio?
Herbivores.
Yes.
In Ohio. I was going to say like cattle, given how much. How many cows the state has, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so a lot of people would think, I guess cattle probably would win, but in terms of the non-native, but I was thinking in native, most people are gonna say deer. But actually, if you take all of the deer in Ohio and you put them in a big pile, and you take all of the caterpillars in Ohio and you put them in a big pile, the pile of caterpillars would actually dwarf the pile of deer. And that's how we bring it back to birds, is that if that's just caterpillars, and we think about all the other insects that are herbivores, there's a lot of different insects that are herbivores in Ohio. And that's what's important to birds. So if you want birds in your backyard, you need to think like an insect. You need to think, how am I going to get more insects in my yard? So there's a lot of different things you can do. One of the easiest, because it requires actually less work than you're doing now, is don't rake your leaves. Whenever I see people rake their leaves and put them in those big black bags and put them out to the trash, I just think in my head, oh, they're throwing away so many insects. A lot of insects overwinter in leaves, and then they would emerge the next spring. But if you bag them up and send them to the landfill instead, that's a lot of food for bird that you're just getting rid of. When you're doing trimming in if you have, like your milkweed from last year or any sort of stems from last year, insects also like to live in those stems. They build, a lot of times they overwinter in those stems. So if you cut those stems, and again, you also throw them out to the trash, same thing, you're throwing away the insects. So if you can leave them, that'd be great. But I understand a lot of people want to clean up their lawn. So just find like a corner of your lawn to pile up like branches, any sort of, anything you're trimming, and have what I call like a messy yard. Like if you have a little bit of a messy yard, there's just going to be a lot more habitat for insects and for birds as well. You can also try to do things like if there's a dead tree or limb or something like that, if you can leave it instead of cutting it down, that can create a lot of bird habitat. Actually, how I'm going to try to show you in my yard right here, maybe you can see, there's this tree, it's great shape. It's kind of dying in some senses slowly, but you can see this hole here. And inside this hole, it's actually been filled with little sticks. And there's tons of holes. So the woodpeckers have been using this tree. And if I had cut it down as soon as it started to kind of die or show some dead limbs, like most people do, that's a huge resource that wouldn't be there for those woodpeckers and those other birds as well. And the woodpeckers have actually brought the little sticks and filled up the inside of the tree, and because they can use hollow stems for nesting as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make your yard bird friendly, but basically just think about the bugs and be willing to have a little bit of a messy yard.
And then, do you know, like if you do have like a native plant garden, when is a good time to cut down the stems and haul them away, or like, because I know like recently we've had like some days that were in the 70s, and then like a couple days later it's back down into the 30s or 40s at night. So is there a general rule of thumb?
Yeah, well, there's not really a good answer to that, to be honest, because some insects emerge as late as summer. So if you cut them down and get rid of them at any time of the year, you are going to be throwing away some bugs. So, I mean, wait as long as you can, or if you can find a corner to pile it up is ideal, or maybe don't cut it all the way down. So like the bottom foot or so of the stems is going to be the most highly used because that's just the most protected. So if you are willing to, again, messy yard, leave that foot or so of stems, then those insects can emerge whenever they're ready. Because yeah, some of them are going to be emerging now, but some don't even emerge until full summer, really.
Gotcha. And that kind of leads into like, do you all still have the Audubon backyard type program where a yard can get certified?
So we actually kind of transformed that from backyard to the backyard challenge. So we will have, it's not an official certification, but there are steps that our participants can take. And actually right now they have a sign in their yard that says they're going native. And then at the end of this program, they'll receive a more permanent sign that they can have that they were a member of the Backyard Challenge. So one of the things they'll be doing is serving wildlife in their yards. And hopefully what we'll find is that in introducing more natives and getting rid of other non-natives, they'll actually increase the wildlife between birds, insects, and other mammals.
Very good. And before I forget, what is the website that people can go to check out the Grange Insurance Audubon Center?
Our website is grange.audubon.org.
Awesome. Easy enough to remember.
It is.
So is there, I guess one thing is looking at the threats to birds. What are some of the larger threats to birds, and can people make a difference in reducing those threats? And I'll open this up to either one of you.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different threats to birds. And so I guess I'm going to sum it up in one threat, say ecosystem degradation overall. So there's a lot of different things going on, and all of them are really impacting birds. So there's what I like to call an insectageddon, in that there's been bugs. There's a huge decline in the amount of bugs in the world. And one way that this can kind of be seen is through what's called like the windshield effect. So if you remember when you were a kid and used to drive in the summer on the highway, and when you'd be done, there'd be insects all over your windshield. And now when you do that, you might hit a swarm once in a while, but most of the time there's not that many insects on your windshield. And like I was talking about for the backyard, insects are really important food source for birds. There was actually a researcher in Denmark that did a study, the windshield study, and they drove the same route every year for 10 or 20 years and found a dramatic decline in the amount of insects. And that's just one way that we can see it. There's a lot of habitat loss, of course, and there's the pollution and other things. So climate change, for instance, is a huge factor for birds. 2/3 of North American birds are projected to be at risk from global temperature rise. And all of these things are happening together at the same time, right? So birds are kind of the canary in the coal mine. There's a reason why canaries were put in the coal mine. Is they're more sensitive to pollution, or in that case, air quality. And so if the canary would stop singing, then they would know there's a problem with air pollution. So we're seeing that happen in the world today. There's been a 30% loss in birds since 1970. They estimate about 3 billion birds less today than there were in 1970. So that's 1 in 3 birds essentially are gone from 1970. And there's a lot of different things that are going on. Migratory birds in particular are really vulnerable because they need multiple different areas. So they need their breeding grounds, which is here for many migratory birds. They need those to be stable and have a good food source and be good environment for them. They need a safe migratory path with food along the way, and they are at risk for collisions with all kinds of different tower structures or buildings or things like that on their migratory path. And then they need a stable overwintering ground as well, right down usually in like South America, Central America. And so these birds in particular have suffered a lot of losses and if they are missing any place along that link, that can cause issues for them. But there is a promise. So during that period since 1970, most categories of birds decreased, but during that period of time, wetland birds actually increased. And in terms of types of birds, raptors increased 200%. And those were because of actions that people took, right? So there's been a lot of focus on wetlands, wetland conservation, wetland restoration during that time. And we've increased the amount of wetlands during that time, and the birds responded. And the raptors, the DDT was banned in 1972. And so since 1970, raptors have increased 200%. So if we remove these risks, if we do the things we need to conserve birds, they can recover. We have evidence of that. So we know that we can do things. So I think what we can do individually, I'd say that right now we are at the beginning of what I'm going to call, and a lot of people call, an environmental revolution. And so in human history, we've had, the agricultural revolution when people started to farm, industrial revolution when people started to, make in industry. And now we're starting the environmental revolution. We're shifting the way that people think and live and act. But we need more impetus behind it. But there's been a lot of progress. So, for instance, the city of Columbus is making a climate action plan. And the city of Columbus is not the only city. There's a lot of cities all over the place that are thinking about environmental related things, are concerned about climate change and all of these other things together. There's, industries are changing too. Like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is investing in different engineering solutions. It's even gotten to sports. So like NASCAR, which is, a motor sport, not necessarily environmentally friendly. They actually have a green initiative, green.nascar.com. They have a carbon neutral team that has neutralized their carbon footprint. And then consumers are responding as well. They think that like electric car sales, for instance, will be about 60% of car sales by 2040 in some parts of the world.
So it sounds like there's definitely a lot going on that people, even though it is a pretty big problem, obviously, but it's something where there's something that everybody can do individually, as well as a neighborhood, as well as a township or a village or a city or as a state, to really make a difference, it sounds like. And
Yeah,
you had
exactly.
mentioned you'd mentioned migratory birds, and so for folks that are viewing this, can you just rattle off a couple migratory birds so they could kind of be like, oh, that hummingbird there didn't just like hibernate over the winter; it went down to wherever they go.
Sure. Well, I'll hop in, and then if Rebecca wants to add something, we can do that. But usually at the center, when you come in to visit, we are free and open to the public Tuesday through Saturday right now from 10 to 3. We have a display when you first walk in the door. It's called a living field guide. So it has over 180 different bird species that have been seen in the important bird area in which we sit, which also includes Burliner, that's just south of West Burliner Park, and Green Lawn Cemetery. And so those are kind of categorized by the time of year you might be able to see them. So we have the migratory birds that are here in the spring and the fall, traveling through Ohio and have special needs. We have birds that come here, migrate to us, and then stay for the summer. And then we also have birds that move here basically for the winter. So some of the migratory birds, people get really excited about warblers, and there's many different types of warblers. I will admit, I am a birder, but the warblers are the hardest ones for me to identify either by sight or sound. I say sight because we often call them like warbler fireworks because they move so quickly. They're not the ones that are going to sit still for you like waterfowl will on aquatic habitats. But we've got many warblers and vireos. There's still some raptors that will be moving into the area, some woodpeckers. We saw yellow-bellied sapsuckers last week at the center. We took a staff hike, and a really exciting bird that we saw last week at the center, which is also considered migratory and moving through this space right now, is the black-crowned night heron. So we saw 2 of those. I actually went back afterwards to get some pictures, and they had moved because they're a little bit hard to find, and we were pretty excited during our staff hike that they were just sitting out there in the open for us to see. We also saw a palm warbler. So you'll hear a lot of conversation about warblers this time of year. They are very exciting. They're coming from Central America, South America, and traveling up this way to go farther north. But lots of little birds out there. Lots of bird lists on eBird and through Audubon that you can check out.
Seems like it's one of those things where once you start realizing there's like not just one type of bird, you start seeing all sorts of birds out there, and that just listening to the different calls where it's like you might hear a cardinal off the window, and if you listen, you can hear the cardinal that cardinal's talking to a little bit further away, which is pretty cool. And then, so one thing is like, connecting birds with our neighborhoods, because Columbus, we're all about our neighborhoods and really improving the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And it seems like obviously nature plays a big part in that. What are some ways in which like helping birds can help address the inequalities within our neighborhoods?
Sure. So I guess to first talk a little bit about some of those inequalities, there's a term called environmental justice, which refers to basically that there should be an equal distribution of what they call like environmental benefits and environmental burdens between everyone, regardless of income or race or anything. But that doesn't happen currently. So the EPA has like an environmental justice screening tool that you can actually, it's a really good tool that you can pull up maps of cities and you can look at different demographic factors like race or income or things like that alongside different like pollution factors and things that are called then environmental burdens. And you can see that a lot of these things are a lot more heavy in areas with low income, which tend to be disproportionately, people of color in particular as well. So and then the green space is the same thing. There's a lot of environmental benefits. So like we were talking about that, being out and being around birds is beneficial. There was even like an article recently that somehow they came up with a number saying that being around 14 or more different types of birds is similar to making $200 more each month. And basically that just refers to the concept that, there's a benefit to us to being around nature. It's not necessarily the birds completely just by themselves, but everything that goes along with that. And this is unevenly distributed in Columbus and in most major cities. That lower income people tend to have less of these benefits, and they're more likely to have higher cancer risk, higher pollution, and things like that. And birds are a vulnerable species, and low-income people are also vulnerable as well to different environmental degradations. So it's important to think about birds are bioindicators. You know, they, like we talked about the canary and the coal mine. So if we have more birds around, then that's a sign of that we have good environments. And in a lot of these lower income neighborhoods, we have less types of birds and less birds in general. So if we improve the environment for people and nature at the same time, then we help birds. And the Grange Insurance Audubon Center is a great example of that. So that was an area like we talked about before. It was an industrial area in downtown, in an area where there's not a lot of environmental benefits, and it's been converted and now has great ecosystems. It's along the river, it helps clean the water. So it helps get rid of some of those pollution issues and things like that might be negatively impacting, especially some of our low-income citizens. And at the same time, it provides great bird habitat. So the National Audubon has a great quote that I think really kind of explains this really well. If you take care of the birds, you take care of most of the big problems in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an excellent example of how everything is kind of interconnected. And so, like, you know, for good and bad. And so we all can make a difference to do something a little bit good, and then it kind of not the repercussions, but it kind of ripples out, you know. So a couple more questions. Actually, I have a quick comment, and that is, you know, we were talking about insects and caterpillars, and I did want to throw out there that Mayor Ginther signed the National Wildlife Federation's Monarch Butterfly Pledge. So we've pledged to do a number of things to improve monarch habitat. For example, a couple of years ago, City Council struck milkweed from the noxious weeds list. Our Recreation and Parks has planted, with volunteers, have planted dozens of acres of pollinator species throughout Columbus. And there's other types of things that we've done, promoted, you know, habitats, or monarch butterfly habitats through social media, and then our Columbus Blueprint. Part of that is rain gardens and using native plants there. But I know we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation here, but somebody who is walking into the Grange Insurance Audubon Center for the first time, what is one thing, or maybe two things, that each of you would tell them, make sure you don't miss, you know, fill in the blank. So I'll open it up to whichever one of you all wants to answer that particular question.
Well, I think it's fun, especially this time of year right now, especially our younger visitors. I had a lot of kids in over the weekend that got really excited. They came in with their binoculars and they were pointing out the different birds on that living field guide that I mentioned. So I usually ask them what their favorite bird is and kind of get them thinking that way, and then talk to them about some different birds that might be moving through the season. And we have a little bird list that they can use. It was put together with Columbus Audubon as well. And it's kind of a life list of birds, if you will. So it's something exciting that they can actually take with them, go to our library and view birds in there. We also have speakers, so that's always an awesome place to go visit. It's relaxing. You can also see the city, so it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there. But you can hear the birds at the feeders, so that's kind of an entertaining area. And then some other things that we've got some turtles that are very exciting things to visit when people come to see us. And we have some backpacks that people can rent as well. And it's just free. You just leave your ID and then you can go on your own adventure out in the park.
And Rebecca, how about you? Like, what's one or two things that you'd want to make sure anybody who's visiting the center that they see?
Well, I think that one of the biggest benefits of coming to this center is I mean, Allison already mentioned this, but the bird feeders is just there's bird feeders there and so many different types of birds. I feel like there's every time I go out, I see at least some bird at the bird feeders, and it's just a really great opportunity to be able to get close to them and to be able to kind of see how they act and just get more familiar with them, because I just think it's important for us to understand birds so that we can do a better job in protecting them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we will open it up here. So get your questions ready, folks that are in the audience. While they're writing their questions or getting their questions, I did want to point out that we do have our GreenSpot Community Backyards program, which gives up to $50 rebates on rain barrels, native trees, or native plants. And Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District, they're the ones that implemented that portion of GreenSpot for us. So you can check out that program on columbusgreenspot.org. And then can you remind us again of the web link, the website to the Audubon Center?
Ours is grange.audubon.org.
Great.
Yep.
All right. So let's, I'm going to see if I can navigate the technology here. It's always a challenge with me. So if anybody has any questions, you should see a little hand icon, I believe, that you can raise. Go ahead and do that. And let me know. Well, that's how you'll let me know that you have a question. All right. I'm not seeing any. So let me check one more time here. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. So I don't know if you all have any parting thoughts you could share with our viewers on the Audubon Center.
I just wanted to add that I know it's been really hard during COVID and all of us being cooped up inside and not being able to do things, but I remember the last day we were open before we closed the center. And even on that day when I left, it was about a week after everything else had shut down. I was really excited by the number of people I saw out in the park. And I know for me personally during this time, you know, I feel like nature is a peaceful place and it can heal if given the opportunity for people to enjoy it. And I think nature never closed during COVID. So my hope is that people have become even more aware of the birds in their backyard and what they can do to make sure they stick around and also help other pollinators as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would just kind of to echo Allison, just say that there's a lot of things that people can do as individuals to help birds and nature and ecosystems, and you know, planting natives in your backyard, join what I call the taking grass up by its roots movement, things like that. Or there's a lot of different ways that people can get involved in. And Audubon has a climate action handbook if anyone wants ideas of things that you can do to help implement change and be part of the environmental revolution.
Very cool. Very cool. And I did get a question in on my phone, but they were asking, is there any type of, with bird seed, we talked about planting native plants, you know, to attract the insects, to attract the birds. Like, what are your thoughts on like putting out bird feeders and bird seed, stuff like that?
Well, we do have bird feeders at the center. Obviously, we want to make sure that we have plants available for the birds first and foremost, so that they can be sustained on those. But then obviously, because we do have bird viewing areas and things like that, we do have the feeders at our center. I will say in those summer months, we don't fill them quite as often because we want to make sure birds can still have the ability to find food on their own and that it's provided for them in places. So that's very important. But definitely in the winter months, we kind of supplement the food sources that the birds have so that they can get through the winter. Because Ohio winters are always very interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you all taking the time to talk to us about the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. Thanks to those who are in attendance or who are viewing the recorded version of this. And just a reminder that our GreenSpot conversations will continue. Our next one, I can never remember when the next one is, but there is the next one. Actually, it's going to be with Simply Living, and that's coming up in here in April. So check us out on Facebook, Columbus GreenSpot, for more information on that. And I just want to thank again Allison and Rebecca for taking the time, and I hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Take
Thanks
care.
for having us.
Thanks for having us, David.